The original Deus Ex is one of my favorite games of all time. I hold most if not all games to the spectrum that this game built in terms of its story, its atmosphere, and the overall in-depth nature of the game, that at first glance almost seems like nothing, but the more you play and familiarize yourself with its mechanics, becomes quite deep with the amount of options versus your playstyle. Simply put, Deus Ex is a very deep game that came out around a time where most games weren't really all that deep. It was a trailblazer of a game that invigorated most games that we know today, such as Fallout and Skyrim, and is the godfather of the FPS RPG hybrid. It's a game that came out in an era that was dominated by the mascot platformer, not games necessarily that made you think per se, but rather had you programmed to go from point A to point B with one linear pathway of you getting there. Deus Ex offered the contrary. You didn't have to go from one straight path to reach your destination, even though you probably could. You could take several ways, and using your wits would find alternate pathways and would oftentimes be rewarded for doing such. It rewarded your skills as a player for thinking outside of the box. Despite the game being nearly 20 years old, it's still a marvel to behold and play if you haven't because of the overall design behind it. Sure, some other games have done it better since, but no game has mastered all aspects of what Deus Ex does well as much as Deus Ex does. Otherwise, we'd be holding that game to its standard, and so far, there isn't much of a discussion in that regard. It was the first game that I ever played that made me realize that my actions in this game had consequences, that I could either be a villain or a hero depending on what I do, and sometimes what I do isn't exactly the best thing I could have done in that situation in hindsight due to the events that transpire further on in the game because of your transgressions. The impact of your actions hit me immediately as I was programmed from games like Doom and Duke Nukem to shoot everything in your sight, which is exactly what 9-year-old me did when I first spawned in the game's first map, Liberty Island. Upon spawning, you're met with a UNATCO trooper who's on your side, but unbeknownst to me, I didn't know, and a military bot straight out of RoboCop. So what did I do?
Monitor your situation from HQ.
Think that with my one clip of ammo for my 10mm pistol would be enough to take both down, and I would go on to get a rocket launcher and a shotgun and just plow through the entire game. Except I couldn't. I died every single time because this wasn't that kind of game. It was slower, it was methodical, it was smarter, and it was conditioning you to play the game with the trepidation that one wrong move can result in your death. And it wasn't like most games at the time. If you're not fast with your quick saving, death means game over. You're starting over from your last save point if you have one. No checkpoints, no autosaves, no continues. One life, you die, you're going back to the main menu. Suffice to say, the original Deus Ex could be brutal sometimes, but I've never had more fun or had ever been more invested in a story, in a game, in all of my life. The more I played, the deeper down the rabbit hole I went as the story unraveled itself before your eyes, going against the grain of the video game stereotypes and tropes that you knew at the time, making you think about who you really trusted and who you should invest in as you travel throughout different parts of the world trying to unravel this mystery and potentially save the world as this badass nano-augmented super soldier named JC Denton. If it isn't clear enough, I love this game. Its impact on my life is profound, and it's games like this that make me love video games. So naturally, when I heard about a team looking to remaster this game, I was extremely excited, but a little bit nervous all the same. There's no beating around the bush when it comes to Deus Ex. It's an ugly looking game at surface value, and even at the time of the game's release, people panned its graphical fidelity for being under the standards of most games at that time. But like the old saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. Regardless, most people don't budge on the game strictly because it's a smudgy old game that looks like it could have been ran on a calculator, and at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if it did. But with revision, there was hope. With revision, anyone who had trepidations about the look of the game could finally play a version that was more up to their speed if that sort of thing mattered to you. For the majority of us fans, it was a new way to experience a classic. But was it worth it? Was it faithful? Oh hell yeah. To say that revision is nothing more than a paint job would be the biggest disservice to Caustic Creative, the devs behind the remastering. It goes beyond just updating textures and making the game look pretty. There's a general improvement on mostly everything the original game had to offer, whether it's the AI, for the most part, weapons balancing, the overall code of the game, and a more fleshed out and vibrant world than the one that could have been offered to us 20 years ago, with a brand new soundtrack to boot featuring remixes of the original themes, It all gives off a shiny new car feeling that you can't wait to break in. Revision manages to also restore cut content that was never released into the main game, and manages to fit it all in perfectly, giving you new things to experience on this brand new run-through. This remastering goes far and above the Call of Duty. Maps have been completely redone and now contain more secrets than before, and while the look and feel may differ from its original counterparts, all the right notes are hit to establish a familiar feeling in a new territory. Some, however, do take time to adjust to because of the scope of some of the maps. On my first run-through of Hong Kong, I was hopelessly confused because of how large each section was, and the maps sometimes being too much sensory overload for you to get acclimated with your surroundings properly. Maps are a lot larger than before, and all the texturing in them is top-notch, with the world reflecting the environments you're in. Whether it's beautiful Paris nights, or gloomy New York streets, or the vibrant Hong Kong underworld, you'll never feel like you're looking at the same place twice. It also borrows assets from other mods released for the game over the years, including the HDTP models, which are, for the most part, hit or miss. Some models are phenomenal, while others can downright be nightmare fuel. It's a little disappointing that the mod doesn't expand to all NPCs in the game, however, but regardless, it wasn't made by these guys, so the fault shouldn't be pinned on them for the way some of these turned out, and the exclusions made by the original modder. The fact that the option is even there is awesome enough, and if it really bugs you enough, you can always change it at any time via your menu options and customize it to how you like. Another popular mod is the Biomod Shifter mod, which is also included and also selectable via the menu for anyone who enjoys the effects Biomod and Shifter and believes that that is the way the game should be played. Weapons have also been retextured and now will reflect any modifications you put on them, such as scopes, laser sights, and to a certain extent silencers. There are also new variants of older weapons hidden throughout portions of the game that come with their own unique properties and skins, and one of the best parts about this game is the ability to not lose any of your progress with your already selected modded weapons, as you can essentially merge your currently modded weapon with your new pickup should you come across any of these special weapons. It's nice to see that that consideration was taken for the players here, as that could have essentially made parts of the game brutal toward the endgame, with the weapon that stats are essentially fresh. There's also been certain modifications made to some of the skill sets, which you earn by obtaining skill points via completing mission objectives, or finding other means of getting around that aren't the beaten path. These skill sets include your basic stuff, such as handgun control, rifles, heavy weapons, demolition, to even things such as your ability to hack computers, or use health kits and the amount of health you gain back from using them, or even using lockpicks effectively. I mean, there's a plethora of skills that you can choose from to enhance your character, but in the original some of these had no use being upgraded past a few times. Revision offers more on the table, expanding upon some of the older skills, such as advanced computer skills letting you save emails, which comes in handy when you need to memorize an email password login combo, or demolitions permanently disabling turrets, cameras, lasers in its master level, which, to be honest, should have always been a thing. It also expanded some of the augmentations, which are essentially power-ups that you gain throughout the course of the game. One in particular is the synthetic heart augmentation, which essentially lets you cheat out from having to gain an additional augmentation canister upgrade, which beefs up your abilities per every canister, with it maxing out at level 4. With this augmentation, all you needed to do was turn it on with your other aug and it would boost up a level ahead of what it was currently sitting at from level 1 to 2 and so on, but you had to do it manually. In Revision, it cuts the fat and turns it into a passive augmentation, turning on whenever another augmentation turns on so you don't have to waste time. Simple, yet effective, and there's a lot of other little fixes like this that honestly adding them all would boggle your mind, so I'm just going to display them here in this text box for you to see. It's quite a bit to talk about, so I'm going to let you read it. The AI has also been vastly improved from the original game. In the original game, the AI was often dumb as bricks and about as blind as a bat, whereas in here they're pretty much right where they should be in terms of the normal difficulties. And that even includes the new balance tweaks for the bosses in the game, but as I said, that's only on the normal difficulties. Realistic mode will absolutely break you with this new AI, and when you combine that with some of the newer enemy types added in, like the MJ-12 Elite Troopers and some of the damn snipers, you're going to have a very bad day going through realistic mode. Snipers will almost always one-hit kill you, and the elites will always melt your health like a hot knife through butter if you don't get the drop on them. It's better to play the game first on the normal difficulties, then switch over to the harder ones in order for you to really get situated with how the game plays. But even then, good luck. I was only ever able to beat the game once on realistic mode, and that was only because the game allows you to do a New Game Plus mode after you beat the game. And speaking of New Game Plus, New Game Plus is not the only feature to be added in. There's various modifiers that you can add to fine-tune your in-game experience, such as turning on a Matrix mode, which makes sure that turning around is the worst decision of your life, or something as silly as enabling one-liners for your character to throw out sarcastically as he dispatches his enemies. Add that with challenge modes that are constantly being updated and survival modes which test your skills in this game, and the replayability factor is essentially limitless. However, one of Deus Ex's most fun components was its multiplayer and its community. And unfortunately, Revision is a single-player experience only, with further multiplayer support not looking too likely. If there were anything I personally would want out of Revision, it would be that to hopefully reinvigorate the multiplayer scene that died out with the GameSpy server shutdown, for those who didn't know about the master server upgrade. Although I'm not sure I'd want these guys to work their tails off so people can play Smuggler 24/7, but it would still be nice to get everyone back together again, and Revision could have very well been a catalyst for more awesome map creators and wacky lobbies such as this being shown. A man can dream, I hope. Regardless, this is well worth trying out, as the mod is free for anyone who already owns a Deus Ex Game of the Year copy on Steam. And even if you don't own the original game is dirt cheap and well worth the price, as this mod delivers and then some. Do yourself a favor and try out Deus Ex Revision. Despite a few short hiccups here and there, there's no denying that this is the quintessential way to revisit a classic game and a love letter for those who truly enjoy a Deus Ex experience. The developers are actively working on the game to this day and take feedback of any kind because at their core, they're just as much fans as we are, and I can't thank them enough because without them, we wouldn't have this amazing piece of work, and I can't wait to see what comes down in the future.
Wooden chopstick.
By the way, did you see what happened to the soldier we sent into the statue? He turned up dead. No! I spill my drink. Hey, who do you think you are?
You can't fight ideas with bullets. Bravery is not a function of firepower.
Something about that guy didn't smell right. You better double check your systems. What did he work on?
The fuel system. Now that you mention it. Wait a minute. This isn't right.
What isn't?
Oh my God, JC, a bomb!
A bomb!
It's remote controlled. Hold on.
Get out of there.
Just have to pull this wire. There. Relax. I disabled the dead.
Oh my God, Daddy!